Okay, I would like to be able to show you something before we actually start on the real sphere that will help you understand the structure I want you to use. Let's go ahead and put this on the paper, and I'm going to hold it down firmly, and I want to drag my pencil around. You notice that I have my point tilting away from the direction I'm going. I'm dragging it around so I don't damage my paper. I'm not pressing very hard. I just want this to become a guideline. So as you notice this circle here, let's go ahead and take out some of the darkest places because we want to utilize our eraser, start getting used to what it takes. I want to start learning how to see the differences in values, and so I want to be able to discern those slight changes. And I want to back this line up. I want to make it a little lighter so that it doesn't become so dark that it dictates to me how dark I have to go up next to it to make the value go away. Now let's go ahead and take a couple airy strokes with our brush. And now I want to show you my normal stroke. As I am sitting here standardizing my stroke, I will show you my stroke that is my individual stroke. And if I do this correctly, I'm not going to have the same curve as there is to the actual sphere. And so I still don't want to make my stroke conform to the picture as much as I want to make the picture, the drawing, conform to my stroke. So I want to be able to go ahead and turn my picture, my drawing, around to accommodate my best stroke. And I don't want to make this thing any tighter than I need to. So I'm going to come up here, maybe take some smaller strokes, some shorter ones. But I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to match this edge up and get right back to my normal length. As soon as I have that just a little filled in there. And now I'm going to start again taking a little longer stroke, not quite as long as what I put out there on the side, but I want to now do the same thing I was doing in my patches. I want to fade this away, both at the entry and the exit. And as I move towards the center, I want this to fade away so I don't really see where it stops. And I don't want to come out too far. If I come out too far, I'm going to start running out of value to use, and I'll end up by actually putting a value that's going to appear flat because it's going to become all the same. I don't want any flat sections on it. Now I want to be able to move my paper around to accommodate my stroke so that I can do the next section. Okay, let's go back the other way. Come out here and match up the edge, making sure that I have a nice clean sharp edge without leaving a line. Just want to come up and match the value. And I'm overlapping what I did before, as well as getting lighter and lighter as I go towards the center. So I'm coming out here with as much value as I'm going to use. I want it to be very light, but I'm going to start fading it towards the center and overlapping what I did before. Remember, I can do that because I'm using my tapered stroke. And if I'm thinking about how light works, everything gets lighter when it goes towards where there's more light will get lighter. Let's go ahead and turn it again. Match up that edge. And if I fade this away and I overlap, I'm starting to create something that looks round and contoured. Do you see how it looks like it's getting darker as it goes around to the dark side? And immediately, because I'm fading it away towards the middle, I'm having something that looks very contoured. And it's actually starting to take on, even in these earliest stages, something that looks 3D. I didn't have to get real dark because my 4H is the only thing on this paper. And so it will always appear darker than it actually is because it's only contrasting with the paper. Can you see this thing taking on contour and curve? Because I have this range of value. I'm not happy with something just the same color. It's flat, and as I pull towards the center, I'm fading it away so I don't really see where it stops. And look at how this is starting to become round and like a sphere. It's taking on dimension. Still using my standardized tapered stroke, same angle. Not getting too dark, but fading it towards the middle, getting lighter and lighter and lighter, so that I have contour and curve. And it is inevitable that this will end up like a round sphere if indeed you remember to overlap and fade it away towards the center. But now I'm going to go ahead and start another one because I want to, instead of starting on the edge, I want to start on the part that's the darkest. That's where I always start in my pictures with my 4H. I always start in the darkest places. Well, I shouldn't say always. There's probably an exception somewhere. But I want to, again, make sure that it is indeed the exception. And I'm following my rule. Because it will be much better for me to make it a basic rule than to just do whatever happens. Having an order and a procedure and a process, having that recipe, will help me get there. And be able to expect the results. Okay. So anyway, you see as I'm fading it away, it's inevitable. This will look round and curved. Okay. Now, once again, let's take this, hold it down firmly in the center, and drag the tip away from the direction I'm going. Just drag it around the circle. This keeps me from poking it in and damaging the paper. I don't want to go straight in, and poke it right directly at the paper, because I'm probably more apt to damage it, poking that point right at it. But if I drag it around, that just lays on the surface and just leaves a little trail. Okay, let's take that away. Let's tap some of this back that looks like it might be quite a bit darker. Trying to just discern the slightest variations in value. I want to just get better and better at noticing those. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and take a few airy strokes just to get the little fragments off from the eraser. And now I want to show you this. We are going to actually start laying this 4H in the darkest area. You'll notice that it's somewhat of a crescent, and we're not going to go all the way out to this edge, and we're not going to start in the center. If I were to start in the center where it's the brightest actually in this drawing, this would make this more obvious and would actually create a negative. And even though I have my light pencil and I'm thinking, well, this might be light, I want to make sure that I'm keeping things in the proper order, and keeping your value in the proper order will really save you a lot of time and make your picture, the outcome of your picture, far superior, because you'll always have the darkest, deepest things appear as though they're in the darkest, deepest places. So let me go ahead and now let's get a feel for where this crescent is. Now you remember, I hope you remember, if you don't, I'm telling you that we wanted those clean edges before on the edge of the sphere because we want to be able to show that dimensional edge. Everything that goes around and out of my sight is going to have a clean edge. Cheeks, arms, all kinds of things. If it disappears underneath of something, we're going to want to have a clean edge most of the time to separate where it goes inside a garment, or inside your nose, or inside your mouth, or your ears, or under your eyelids. These are all going to have places where we can't see it anymore, and we need a clean edge to separate it from the rest of the picture. But in this case, we have a contour. And this is another concept that I want you to try to take into consideration and practice it as much as you can. I would like all edges of shadows to become soft. A little softer than you might even see in the picture sometimes, because one of the things that happens is with flash, it creates very harsh shadows. And we're going to have to really use some common sense as to what is actually the dimensional edge and which one is the shadow edge, because the shadow edge can often look like it's a harsh edge, something that's going around and out of our sight, something that's coming out from underneath of something. So the better I can be at showing soft edges of shadows, the more I'm going to be able to separate those from my true dimensional lines. So it's a real good rule. I can actually make something a little softer on the edge if it's a shadow and a contour than I might see it in my my subject. But with a contour, you always see in and out. You can see into the contour and out of the contour. With a shadow, the edge of the shadow that's soft will be the one coming to where there's more light. And again, because I'm using my 4H as the first initial pencil, it is going to look dark enough to demonstrate that I'm working on the darkest place. Fading it towards the edge. Linger a little bit longer in the middle to get the full value. And fade it towards the center. Okay, let's go a little further. Now remember, my 4H is not only representing the darkest place, but it is my undercoating, my primer, so that in those areas later on, if I had gone right to my soft pencil, it would have just created something very coarse with a lot of little white specks in it, because the soft pencil doesn't really cover as well unless you really bear down on it, and it'll show something that represents more of a texture than something where it actually goes to where there's less light. In this dark place, I want there to be less light. Okay. Fading it both ways, creating that base so that I can start putting other pencils on top of it. Remember, this is the difference between this and our last exercise. we're actually going to be layering on these pencils, one over the top of another, utilizing all 5 grades, but starting out with one so that we can put the others on top of it. Now if I use my tapered ends, those soft tops and soft bottoms to those patches, I should be able to overlap. Because I'm not only blending it in what was previously there, I'm also creating a transition so that I can continue adding on to it seamlessly. We don't want to have this come across as we're tiling. And the wonderful thing about this stroke is that I can do it. Now, even though I've shortened this stroke up, to make sure that I can fit in this space, I'm not curving it differently. I'm just going ahead and taking my regular stroke that's a little bit of a diagonal on the page. I'm trying to take the full length of that stroke so that I don't start getting narrower and narrower and narrower, and making basically a triangle shape out of it like we've talked about before. And I'm seeing opportunities we're going to have here to use our eraser just to start keeping up with all these little blemishes and little darker places that will happen anyway, just because of the inconsistencies in the paper, the inconsistencies in the texture. Okay, let's go ahead and see if we can pick off a couple of these little inconsistencies here. Seems like it's a little darker there. I'm going to practice with my eraser so that I can get really good at not pulling off too much. If I did, I'd just come back in there with the pencil, but I want to see if I can do it just enough. See, I'm just touching it on there and lifting that graphite off, trying to be as careful as I can to only take off the part I intend to take off. I'm going to take another little airy stroke to make sure I don't leave any fragments of that eraser on there. Now, even though I can go a lot darker with the 4H, I don't want to damage my paper. I want to make sure I can get it off. So I'm just grazing the surface and lingering long enough to get what I consider the full value, for at least at this stage, that I want to achieve. Probably get just a tiny bit more value out of this without damaging the paper. So I'm just increasing the value just ever so slightly in the center of this. Feathering it both ways though, because this is a contour. Okay, let's go ahead and do some 2H. Now that I've prepared that base, and once I increase the value here, then I'll go back to my 4H and I'll extend the 4H out a little further, preparing the way for being able to use my HB where I'm using this 2H now. Oh, getting a little too dark there. Starting to go into territory where I didn't have the undercoating. With a darker pencil, it'll always look harsher when it's on the fresh surface, something that doesn't have any pencil on it previously, as you found out probably in your patches. Let's turn this around. Okay, now let me go just a little bit more right here and fade this away on this 4H. And then we'll take that 4H back and start working with that again. Again, once you graduate, in your drawing from the 4H to the next pencil, it doesn't mean you just stay with that next pencil. It means that you go back and forth now between the two pencils until you're ready to even incorporate the third pencil, the HB. And you'll go back and forth with all those three as you prepare the way again and add another layer on top. Okay, now let's go ahead and take our 4H and use it somewhat as a blender and to extend out our primer a little bit further. And because I have this a little darker in the middle now, I can actually go back the other way and start coming out to meet that line. Remember, I don't want to go on the line. I want to come right up to it so that it becomes an edge to my value. We want to match that tone, that value. Turn this around. I can start coming the other way, overlapping. Remember, to keep polishing your skill, it's seeing slight value variations. The better you are at discerning the slightest little variation in value, the more you'll be able to join areas together that you'll keep from having something become too dark and overbearing, that you'll be able to maintain curve, and ultimately all the other things will also benefit. Now we're almost ready to go up to the next pencil. Got to prepare the way towards the center a little bit more with my 4H to create a slight tone out to the edge. Notice I shorten my strokes up every once in a while because I'm trying to fill some spaces, some shorter little spaces, because I want to try to fill the gaps to give this more continuity as I go. It may be a lot easier for me to do it as I go than to just get out there and find that I've got a whole lot of places to fill, and that becomes an overwhelming task. And I want to visualize some of the things I'm trying to achieve all the way through the process instead of waiting, hoping it'll fall together or come together later. Start bringing this towards the middle now so we don't just have this dark band in there. I'm going to give myself a transition to where there's more light. Let's take off a couple of the things that look like they're building up and getting a little dark. Just lightly put the eraser on there and take off those places. It is just wonderful that I can manipulate my picture like this. remember, I just had my 4H. Okay, just a little more preparation here and I'll go into my HB. Now see, if I kept going the same direction, I would start seeing a very linear pattern to my strokes. But because I'm turning my picture all the time and I'm overlapping, going another direction, then it obscures that structure and actually will become a very smooth transition from dark to light and light to dark. And because I'm turning my picture and I'm fading it away, it's going to look like a sphere, a dimensional sphere. Get this around here just a little more so that I can use my HB on there. Still using my 4H though. I want to get this 4H working towards the middle just enough that I can have an undercoating for my next pencil, or as I extend my 2H out there further. Okay, that's probably enough. Let's go ahead and get our HB now. Develop a little darker value. No more pressure on my pencil, remember. Just utilizing the appropriate pencil to get the value I want. Now, if you have an isolated stroke that seems a little darker out here, often, well, you can make the assessment whether you need to back it off, but often it's darker because it's all by itself. So if I give it some company, some surroundings, some environment, camouflage, make it so it isn't the only one out there trying to represent that value, it will start going away as I give it company, as I put other lines of a similar value next to it. Okay. Let's turn this all the way around again. Start working on that core value. I think I'm going to have to remove a couple things again. I'm going to come in here and shorten my stroke up just so I can kind of doodle in a little value to give some of those isolated darker places some continuity. Give them some attachment, give them some environment. And as quick as I can, get right back out to my regular stroke. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to go back to my 4H. I'm going to extend that out a little more, and I'm going to go over what I just did quickly with my 4H, because it does have a nice blending quality. I don't want to go too hard out there or out here and try to match the value, but sometimes when I'm trying to refine something, it's nice to go back and get something a little lighter, so that when you do make a isolated mark, it doesn't necessarily show. And gradually, my 4H has become a blender, a foundation for everything. Now I've got my 4H back. I'm going to come out here and start laying down some of those very light values so that I can have something other than an isolated line representing the edge of this. I come out and meet that value. Now, as light a value as I'm putting out here, I could end up by, again, having something very flat. That's why I'm telling you to practice seeing the slightest variation in your value. Become very discerning, because I don't want this to become flat, and if I can, I'm going to try to suggest curve. Well, I don't have much value to work with, but it's something to practice. I'm going to go all the way around on this, try and get some initial value in these other areas. See a couple places that need some company, because something is too dark, because it's all by itself. Now you're trying to match that value again on the very edge, because I don't want this edge to be represented by a line. And if I feel like, wow, this edge is going to be quite dark, the way I make it look darker is to have patience, and I put more value in the darkest part of that crescent on the other side. You notice how this is looking very abrupt here? It doesn't look like I've got a very good transition, and because it looks like it's stopping suddenly, it's becoming confusing and looks like it's now the edge of something else. And I really want to blend it in, have that contour, that range of value. I'm trying to really notice just those slight little variations in the value, so I can, again, have continuity. I mean that I want to keep the flow going from dark to light or light to dark. I don't want to sacrifice the curve, the contour that I'm developing. So I want to, put something in a space if it's a little lighter in between, just to make sure that there's a good connection, good continuity. And so it just reads as a gentle graduation of value from one to the next. About ready to put the 2V on here. looking at it from all angles, I want to make sure that, it flows this way, it flows this way, it flows this way, and it isn't going to be perfect, but I still want it to have that overall impression. There's nothing stopping my eye and wanting an explanation or taking away again from that wonderful spherical shape. Same thing again I'd do with a baby's cheek or a woman or anything that was very smooth. I wouldn't want to have something stop me and say, well, that's a blemish or that's a scratch or something like that. And then it just helps you go on and appreciate the rest of the picture that much quicker. You can be involved in what the picture is saying to you instead of little nuances. Rotate this around a little bit more. Got to make sure I keep this in your view. And see, I'm gradually working a little more value into the center. I don't want to sacrifice curve to do it. I don't want to make this flat. I realize it's pretty close. Some of you may say, well, there's not a whole lot of curve to that, but it's amazing how subtle it can be and satisfy our minds that it is indeed contoured. But I want to get something in the center because, again, if it has nothing in there, I cannot mold it. I can't contour it. I can't do a thing with it. It's void. Okay, turn this around. Let's go ahead and give just a little more undercoating for that 2B that's going to go on there. 2B won't be coming way out here towards the center, but I don't want it to just cover over what I have. I want my 4H to go on past and my HB to go on past. My 2H to go on past what the 2B is going to be covering. Okay. All right, let's grab that 2B and see what happens. See, the first initial strokes are so contrasting with everything else. So I've got to be patient. Still not near what you could do with the 2B, but that's not our intent. We want to be in control. We want to see it increase slowly so that we can say, okay, stop. That's just right. You see, the darker the value in this dark area, the lighter my reflective edge is becoming, because I have something to contrast it with. So if I want to make something lighter, I can contrast it with something darker. But that's another reason why I want you to draw, other than this exercise, for the most part, with 4 pencils. I want you to keep the 4B in reserve, because if I indeed had nothing darker to use next to or in the vicinity of something that was very dark, if I wanted it to become lighter, I wouldn't have anything to do that with. I need to be able to contrast it with something. So for the most part, I never want to exhaust all my value. And I don't have to take this 2B near as dark as it can be, because I'm going to have as wide a range of value within the range that I'm working to maintain contour and curve anyway. Remember, because this is a contour, I'm going soft towards each light source. The primary one, I'm fading this away, trying to build a little darker value in here so that, again, I can have the ultimate contour and curve. I'm still fading it away. And the same thing with that reflective light. Now I think you can probably understand that if I were to just be putting this 2B on here, each line would be very, very stark. But because I've used the undercoatings and I've layered, I've used my harder pencils, 3 of them, that are harder than and lighter than this one, it has cut down on that severe contrast within that area I'm using the 2B, so I don't have a bunch of the white specks showing through, and again having something that comes across more as a texture than following any of the rules I've mentioned, like everything gets darker when it goes to where there's less light, things like that. Okay, now I'm going to go back to my 4H because I see a few places I'd like to just blend in a little bit. Maybe taking some of those harsher lines from the 2B and adding some environment for them so they don't just stick out like sore thumbs. Whoop! I dragged my pencil on the paper. See a couple things I need to take off. Here's one right there. Some little imperfection in the paper or something. You'll always be fighting things like this, so it's better just to pull them off and let it get lost by subduing it there with the eraser. Okay, let's go ahead and take our 4H and just kind of blend this in a little bit now. Try and put this a little bit towards the edge to make sure I can get a clean dimensional edge there. To fill a few of the voids, I better turn this around. It's nice to be able to go back to a harder pencil from time to time. It's not always necessary or the thing to do, but if you are trying to fit something in between, something that is a little darker, filling one of those voids, giving it good continuity, it's nice to back up a pencil. I've gone all the way back to the 4H, but sometimes that's not necessary. But it keeps you from making a darker mark when you're really trying to go ahead and give a darker area some environment instead of having it stick out. And if you have a little harder time putting on just that little light value, then it's again good to back up so you're not so apt to put on a dark line and have a whole new set of problems, or just keep accentuating the problem. So now, getting my regular tapered stroke, that's what keeps me from having to see the abrupt places where it's landing. It's just gliding on. I can really put any of these strokes anywhere I want on this, although I am still using that same basic structure in that I'm now coming towards the highlight, trying to make sure that I never give up that sense of contour, just looking for the slightest change in value, a consistent change, so that it just goes and fades away as it enters the highlight. I've used some of our 2B, and I think that I'll go back to the 2B just to make sure that I've got all the value I want out of that 2B. I'll just finish up here with this 4H. Taking this value out to the edge so that I don't want to get darker out in the edge, but I still want to make sure that there's some value in there so that I can contour it. And it'll look lighter again as I make this darker area in here a little more of a value. How can I make something appear lighter? I can go ahead and contrast it with something darker. I just don't want to get carried away with that idea and end up by having everything go so dark that I don't have anything darker after that, and I again start running into a problem. I can't contour it. I don't have many choices left. So I never want to really, if I can help it, I never want to take my values all the way to the darkest value I can, because I can still leave myself a few options. I can leave myself some value in case I need to contour something that is quite dark. Remember, the more directions, if I'm doing two things at once, I am noticing the slightest little light area that keeps it from just flowing towards the highlight. And so I'm trying to just glide in there and take a nice little soft stroke through there and gradually build it up so I see it becoming a better flow towards the dark or the light, and it's not interrupted by this blotchiness or whatever that might start saying something else other than, wow, I want this round. Okay, let's get around here. Now remember, if I said, well, I could do this with the softer pencils. I don't need that 4H or some of the harder ones underneath. And it's time-consuming layering all this and everything. I'm pretty well convinced, after all the years I've been doing this, that you will still end up with something a little different. Isolated, it might look, very acceptable, but you won't be mimicking or learning and executing my technique. And I want to do this as an alternative to using a tortillon or something to burnish it with. I don't want to burnish it. Even though I could get away with something just unbelievably smooth for this sphere, I don't want to take away that subtle texture that, like I've said before, illustrates that subliminal skin texture, pores and little imperfections and variations in skin that make it vibrant and alive. If I polish all that out of there, it looks like a wax figure or something completely different. And you may not even be able to put your finger on it, but I'm convinced it won't be as acceptable to the person looking at it, whether they know it or not. There's a comfort zone in there of saying, yeah, this is what I've seen before. That is so cool. And there's a fine line between showing too many variations. I don't want to have it just be confusion. I want it to read well and instantly. I don't want to have to linger and say, well, I wonder what is that supposed to be like orange peel or something? No, it's not. It's our version of skin. And wonderful soft little contours and curves that we're going to be able to do. And again, this particular exercise is just flat out a great way to get some strokes under your belt, to really have something that is repetitious enough it really starts programming our minds. And I've shown you what we're trying to achieve, so you probably have a little bit of an idea how far we're going to go. Like we were discussing earlier today, children that are told they're going to go on a trip and they're loaded into the car or wherever, but they don't have an idea about where this is or what it entails to get there and all that stuff. They're going to be constantly asking, are we there yet? Are we there yet? And I have many of my students asking those kind of questions on their portraits because They just want to have some sign of where's the goal, is something in sight that I'm going to be able to achieve, and so that's why I showed the finished sphere to begin with, to give you a little bit of an idea of where we're going, what we're trying to achieve. It would be nice to be able to, these are time consuming enough, but it would be interesting to do all the things that could go wrong or don't look well, because then I would have the opportunity to show you one that would be grainier, and then we could compare the two. But I'm going to stick with the one that works here first, and we'll figure out whether whether it's beneficial to see something else. Okay, I think just slight little light areas in here. Maybe it doesn't maybe the paper's a little slick there. All kinds of little things that can go on with paper and pencils, and obviously our own ability to control everything. But I should be able to do this and not even get tired by gripping my pencil and all those kind of things. I just feel I want to see the thing develop, and I'm not fatigued at all. Whereas years ago I used to grip my pencil so tight that I was almost exhausted because I was trying so hard, putting all that tension in. And it's so self-defeating, because I found I can go ahead and have just as much accuracy without all of that tension and control, trying to make it work. I hope that wasn't out of the frame. Okay, let's go back to that 2B. Just saw a little bit on the edge I wanted to clean up. I'll go back and make sure that that gets lighter on that edge. But I wanted to get some value in there so I can have a clean edge. And otherwise there's little vacant notches out of it. And every time I go put this down, I see just a little thing that I could touch up to give it more continuity. Okay. Okay, we finished refining this a little bit before we do our 4B, our last value. We've done that 2B in here, and then refined it a little bit with our 4H. Just to touch up a few things. Alright, let's go ahead and get our 4B now. Remember, we want to make sure that 4B is sharp. And we want to put that 4B in a very narrow place. It's just the crown of that darkest area. I've got to be very careful that I maintain contour and curve, and that I try to see this 4B creating that darkest value, not as dark as we can go, but to create as dark a value as we're going to use here, with quite a bit of value left over, to constitute the greatest depth, to punch this up and even more so that it looks like it's really a 3D, three-dimensional object. Notice I'm using this 4B very light. You could try this 4B on the side, another piece of paper or something, and just look and see how dark it can get, just so you have an idea where you're at in its range. And it's really good not to exhaust all of the value. Because if I went as dark as I could, it would probably start getting flat in that area, and or we'd start having just a band of value through there. Feathering it, blending it back towards that highlight. Boy, I don't want to take this 4B after everything I've done and wipe out that wonderful soft graduation of value, getting lighter and lighter in this subtle area towards the edge. But I do want to blend the 4B into both directions. So again, it isn't just this harsh band going through there. So see, this is what I was talking about. The 4H will eventually, and we're at the end of our project here probably, we have put the 4H over the whole entire expanse of this. But we didn't do it all at once, because we never want to give up that sense of contour and curve. And the 2H, like I said before, is probably very likely in half the area of this sphere. But I don't want to just say, well, it's going to be in half. I'm just going to put it all in there, because it gets harder and harder for you to see contour when you put it in all at once. You want to put it in a little bit at a time and stay in control. This is that good kind of control I was talking about. So it's taken just to the place that I want it to, and then I can stop. And like a portrait, maybe even get away from it and come back and look at it again. This is just a wonderful precursor, something to do and see how well you can do this before you start on your portrait. And I know that not everybody's going to do it perfectly. I'm not, but I've had a lot of experience with it. So I don't want you to get discouraged if it doesn't look exactly like this, but I want you to understand the goals and what we're trying to achieve here, and do the very best you can. So I just started the 4B. Basically I'm finished, because I just want to again put just that finishing touch on it, something that's a little darker. But now let's go ahead and take a look at what we want to have achieved. And kind of go through a checklist here. Every time I turn this around, I see a little bit different value in a few places because of the lighting. Maybe it's the inconsistent texture, maybe something's a little higher in one place, a little deeper in another. And so when I turn it around, it could cast another shadow. So I want to take a look at some of those things and try to even it out. Again, imagine this being somebody's cheek, somebody with a very soft skin and light value, and probably a baby. A lot of you women out there will have cheeks that we want to really be careful to show all of its refinement. Okay, so now what we've tried to achieve is coming up with a clean edge without a line. The cleaner and sharper that edge is, an edge to value. We had a line there to begin with. It was just called a guideline. We wanted it to be very light so it didn't dictate to us how much value we had to put it next to it so that it would go away. And I do want it to go away because I, again, want an edge to value. I want this to go around to the back side. It's clean because I can't see it anymore. It goes around and out of my sight. And then we want to be able to see these two light sources, our primary light source and our secondary light source. This is a reflective light, and this is the division between the two. I want to be able to see a gradation that just gradually goes from light to darker and from dark to lighter, and then we have a little bit curving around the other side as well. But I want to be able to get this nice and clean so that we can have this spear popping off the page. Now I'm going to go scan this, and this will be a sample with this video. So I hope you learned something, and again, practice as much as you can. It's a tedious exercise, but I encourage you to do it over and over and over again if you have that opportunity. It's again one of those that you can just take some time to practice regardless of how long you've been drawing, regardless of how long you've been doing this. It just would be a good tune-up. After a while you'll be doing portraits probably a number of them, many of you, and so you'll have a chance to think about these concepts and these fundamentals so that again you can start having even more effective pictures popping off the page looking like they're three-dimensional.